Not everything that gets recorded is meant to be found. Not everything that happens is meant to be understood. Welcome to the last broadcast. The Auto Captions. I run a small YouTube channel, nothing huge, mostly video essays about true crime cases that never got much national coverage. I do all my own editing, which means I spend a lot of time in the caption tool, cleaning up whatever the automatic transcription spits out before I publish. Anyone who's used auto captioning knows it's far from perfect. It mishears words, it turns silence into gibberish sometimes, and it especially struggles with background noise. I've gotten used to combing through the errors and fixing them by hand. About 2 months ago, I uploaded a video that was recorded late at night in my apartment. Just me talking into the camera about an old case from the 90s. The room was quiet. My roommate was asleep down the hall, and there was no television on, no music, nothing running in the background except maybe the refrigerator, which you can barely hear on the recording if you turn the volume all the way up. When I ran the auto captions, most of it came out clean. My voice transcribed accurately the way it usually does. But there was a stretch about 14 minutes in, lasting maybe 40 seconds, where I went quiet on camera to check my notes. During that stretch, the caption tool generated 4 full lines of dialogue. I want to describe exactly what it produced, because I've read it enough times that I could recite it. The first line read, "He's still." The second line read, "Just wait." The third line was harder to make out even in text form, broken up with ellipses the software uses when it isn't confident in a word. But the piece that came through clearly said, "Behind him," twice. The fourth line was 2 words. "He's looking." At first, I assumed the software had picked up something from outside, a neighbor's television through the wall, a passing conversation on the street. I went back to the raw audio file, the original recording before any editing, and turned the volume up as high as it would go and ran it through noise reduction software to isolate anything under the surface. There is something there. It's faint, and it's layered underneath the hum of the refrigerator. But there are 2 voices, and they are inside the room the recording was made in. Not through a wall and not outside a window. In the room. I don't recognize either voice. One is lower, and it speaks slower, and the other is quicker, almost whispering, cutting in before the first voice finishes its sentence. My roommate was asleep the entire time, and when I asked him the next day if he remembered coming into my room or saying anything to me while I was recording, he looked at me like I'd asked him something insulting. He hadn't been awake. I believe him. I have no reason not to. I didn't publish that section. I trimmed it out entirely before the video went live, telling myself it was a fluke in the transcription software and that I'd chase down the real explanation later when I had time. I never did chase it down, not properly, because 2 weeks after that video went up, it happened again. This time, the auto captions picked up something during a stretch where I was quiet for almost a full minute, adjusting my camera angle. The caption tool produced 3 lines. The first read, "Same spot." The second read, "Doesn't know." The third line the software couldn't parse at all, marked with the low confidence symbol it uses when the audio is too degraded. But underneath that unreadable line, when I isolated the raw audio myself, I could make out a single, clear phrase repeated twice in that same faster, quieter voice from before. Both times, it repeats my name. Not my channel name. My actual first name. The one I've never once said out loud in any video I've published. The one that isn't listed anywhere on my channel or in my bio. I stopped filming in that room. I moved my setup into the living room, where the lighting is worse, and I've had to buy an extra lamp to compensate, but I haven't recorded a single video in that back room since. The auto captions have been clean ever since I moved. No strange lines, no unexplained voices, nothing during my pauses except the ordinary transcription errors everyone gets. I still have both original audio files saved on an external drive. I've sent them to two people whose judgment I trust: an audio engineer I know through the channel and a friend who works in sound design for a small production company. Neither of them could explain how two distinct voices ended up embedded in the recordings at a level low enough that neither my camera's onboard microphone nor my own ears could pick them up in real time, and yet clear enough for a transcription algorithm, something with no ears and no expectations and no fear, to hear them plainly enough to write them down word for word. I moved my equipment out of that room, and I haven't gone back to filming there, and I tell myself it's about the acoustics, or the light, or nothing at all. But I still have the files. I still haven't deleted them, and some nights, when the apartment is quiet the way it was quiet during those recordings, I find myself listening for something under the hum of my own refrigerator, waiting to hear if it's still there. The drone return. Flying drones is how the bills get paid, mostly real estate listings and the occasional wedding. Up front, it is worth stating that there is no room in this line of work for things that cannot be explained. Thousands of hours in the air teach you exactly what a glitch looks like. You learn what wind does to a frame, and you learn the precise difference between a moving shadow and something that should not be there. This needs to be clear because every normal explanation was exhausted before anything else was even considered. This happened about 8 months ago, out on a property near the edge of a county that is mostly farmland and old logging roads. A client wanted aerial footage of a large parcel of land he was thinking about buying, maybe 400 acres, mostly wooded, with a creek running through the back half. The property backed up against a stretch of forest that the county map listed as unmanaged, meaning nobody had logged it or maintained it in decades. I sent the drone out along the tree line to get a sense of the boundary. Everything was normal for the first few minutes. Then the signal started dropping, which happens sometimes near dense tree cover, and I brought up the return to home function, expecting it to come straight back to me. Instead, the video feed cut out entirely. The screen went black. The controller told me the drone was still in the air and still transmitting telemetry, altitude and battery and GPS coordinates, but no video at all. I stood there watching a dot on a map, but the map was glitching too. The GPS coordinates kept fluctuating wildly, jumping from the tree line to points miles away in a fraction of a second, which made no sense for a hardware malfunction. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, the mental rehearsal of the explanation owed to the client for losing his equipment had already begun. Then, the signal snapped back on, the feed returned, and the drone descended, landing itself about 40 feet from where I stood. The flight logs showed a normal battery level for a short trip. I did not think much of it until later that night, when I pulled the card to edit the raw file and noticed the duration was wrong. The camera computer logs the exact length of every recording. The flight log on my controller insisted the drone had been airborne for a brief, routine flight. The video file itself was nearly twice as long. The beginning matched my memory: trees, the creek, the client's property line. Then, at the exact second the video feed had gone black on my monitor, the recording did not stop. Without any visible cut, glitch, or gap in the footage, the picture changed. The drone was hovering low, maybe 15 feet off the ground, over a clearing I never flew over, and that appears nowhere on the county map or any satellite image. The light had gone from full afternoon sun to something closer to dusk, gray and flat and wrong for the hour it was actually shot. The onboard indicator light, which is supposed to blink red at a fixed interval, burned a steady white for the entire stretch. The manufacturer's software does not even have a command for a solid white light on that housing. For a long time, nothing happened. The camera held on the clearing, the grass barely moving, no wind reaching down into that gap in the trees. I watched that stillness, waiting for it to resolve into something explainable. Then something entered the frame from the left edge. It moved low along the ground and crossed most of the clearing before passing out of frame on the right, taking only a few moments. I have gone back and watched that short stretch more times than I can count, trying to find the moment where my brain would let me call it an animal. It did not move like something walking. It moved in short, violent pulls, a lurch forward and a stop, a lurch forward and a stop, the way something moves when it is being dragged by a heavy cord and it has not stopped resisting. Whatever was doing the pulling never entered the frame. Only the thing behind it did. It was pale against the dark grass, and for one relieving second, it looked like nothing but a torn canvas sack caught on a root and blown loose. It stopped moving near the center of the clearing and stayed there. The camera never drifted, holding a perfectly steady angle on it for the remainder of the footage. Then, the footage cut directly to the drone landing in front of me. The manufacturer's engineer found no corruption in the file and no evidence of tampering. He checked the diagnostics and confirmed the file contained continuous data written sequentially to the flash memory, even though the hardware log showed the camera was only powered for a fraction of that time. He asked, carefully, whether I had flown near any restricted government land. I told him I had not, and he did not press the issue. I went back once on foot to find that clearing, the creek lined up, the tree line lined up. I walked that stretch of woods for 2 hours with a handheld GPS, matching the coordinates from the flight log where the signal first dropped. There was no gap in the canopy, just dense unbroken forest that had not been touched in 50 years. I gave my client the edited footage of his property line and told him the rest of the card was corrupted due to a signal error. He did not care because he got the mapping he needed. But I kept the original file. I have not deleted it, and I do not look at it anymore. I keep it on an old thumb drive in my desk drawer. Every now and then, usually when a client asks for a late afternoon shoot near the tree line, I think about those few seconds, and the way the pale thing in the grass did not look like an object once it stopped moving. It looked like a shape trying to decide which way was up. Echoes from the wall. I do not write music for fame. I write because it is the only time my mind goes quiet. For the last 2 months, I spent every evening in my basement studio working on a track called The Horizon Line. It started with a simple 4-chord progression on an acoustic guitar. Then I added a bass line, wrote verses about the winter of my childhood, and recorded the vocals using a vintage microphone. It was entirely mine, born from my own memories and my own frustrations. Last Tuesday, at 2 a.m, I finally bounced the master file and uploaded it to my channel. I went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water while the video was processed. By the time I came back to my desk, the notification bell was already glowing. YouTube had flagged the video. It was a copyright strike, an automatic claim from a major media group acting on behalf of a long-defunct European record label. My initial reaction was annoyance. The automated content ID system is notorious for false positives, often triggering on a similar drum loop or a common guitar sample. I clicked the Details tab to file a dispute, expecting to see a brief match on a generic background track. Instead, the system indicated a 98% match across the entire length of my song. The claimant listed an album titled Shadows in the Grid, released in November of 1984. The artist was an obscure synth-pop band from West Germany called the False Mirrors. I had never heard the name in my life. I opened a separate browser tab and searched for the album. It took 20 minutes of digging through archived vinyl forums before I found a digitized rip of the audio on an old music blog. I downloaded the file, imported it into my editing software, and hit play. The room felt cold. The melody was not similar. It was identical, note for note, transition for transition. The synthesizer patch they used in 1984 had the exact same oscillating texture I had built from scratch in my basement last week. Then the vocals started. A man with a thick German accent began singing the exact lyrics I had typed into my phone notes during my lunch breaks at work. He sang about the frozen lake behind my grandmother's house. He used the specific, non-rhyming metaphors I wrote when I was recovering from the flu in February. I sat there for 2 hours comparing the wave files. The audio spectrums lined up like a pair of matching fingerprints. The next morning, I did not go to work. I contacted an entertainment lawyer, a friend of my cousin who handles intellectual property disputes. We sat in his office while he looked over my project files. I showed him the creation dates on my software sessions. I showed him the scratch tracks from 3 weeks ago, the rough vocal takes, and the physical notebook where I had crossed out words and rewritten lines. The lawyer looked at the German vinyl sleeve I had printed out from the Internet Archive. He told me that legally, none of my drafts mattered. The automated system did not care about my creative process. In the eyes of the court, a copyright established in 1984 wins against an upload in the present day. He told me my options were to let the media company monetize my video or take it down entirely. He treated it like a textbook case of subconscious plagiarism. He suggested I must have heard the song in a grocery store or a movie when I was a child and buried it in my memory. I almost believed him. It was a comforting explanation because it kept the world logical. I thanked him, paid his consultation fee, and drove home. When I got back, I decided to find the people who recorded the album. If they were still alive, I wanted to ask them how they came up with those words. The False Mirrors had only released that one album before disappearing from the music scene. The internet had almost no information on them. After hours of looking through international telephone registries and old German music zines, I found an email address for the band's former audio engineer. He was an elderly man living in Hamburg. I wrote a long message explaining the situation. I attached my song and the 1984 track, asking if he remembered the specific recording session where that exact melody and those English lyrics were tracked. He replied the next afternoon. His English was formal and brief. He wrote that he remembered the session perfectly because it was the last project he ever worked on before quitting the music industry. He told me the band did not write that track. He explained that during the autumn of 1984, the band had spent 3 weeks in a studio near the Berlin Wall trying to finish their album. They were out of ideas and out of money. On their final night, the studio's reel-to-reel tape recorder began malfunctioning. It started picking up a stray, high-frequency radio signal from across the border, cutting through the studio monitors with absolute clarity. The engineer said the signal was a broadcast of a single song playing on a loop. The audio quality was pristine, far superior to any radio technology available at the time. The band was so desperate for a final track to complete the album that they copied the melody down on sheet music, transcribed the English lyrics phonetically, and recorded their own version over the strange broadcast. They titled it Echoes from the Wall. He attached a scanned image of his original studio log from 42 years ago. It was a faded sheet of paper with handwritten notes in German. At the bottom of the page, the engineer had noted the exact date and time the mysterious signal was intercepted. It was November 12, 1984, at exactly 2:15 a.m. I pulled up my YouTube dashboard and checked the advanced analytics for my video. I looked at the exact metadata of my upload, searching for the timestamp when the file had finished processing on the servers. The upload completed on Tuesday morning at exactly 2:15 a.m. I deleted the video from my channel an hour later. The project files are still sitting on my hard drive, but I do not open them anymore. I have not picked up my guitar since last week. Every time I think of a melody or write down a phrase, I am paralyzed by the same thought. I do not know if I am creating anything at all, or if I am catching an echo that has already landed somewhere in the past.